together from the cosmic reaches of the universe. Here, in this great hall of the Signal Watch, are the most powerful forces of good ever assembled. Join us as we discuss all manner of topics across the multiverse of comic books, history, creators, storylines, movies, and more. The Signal Watch podcast presents Kryptonian Thought Beast, a comics podcast series dedicated to truth, justice, and peace for all mankind.
Oh my God. I'm going to cut this off. I just realized I am not saying happy Halloween at the beginning of a podcast for the first time since like August.
Happy post-Halloween.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is
Stuart Ward. Hello.
Hey Stuart, welcome back.
Thanks.
We are very sad to say this past week, we saw the passing of Kevin Conroy, who had been the voice actor for Batman since 1992. If you're unfamiliar with Kevin Conroy, you would have heard him on Batman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, multiple video games. I believe he did the Arkham series. He's basically, if you go to his IMDb, it's pretty much all Batman for the past like 20 years. Including he was supposed to have retired and he did it for about 30 seconds and came back as Batman like after like a week in the sun, I guess. But he is, to many of us, the only stable Batman and our favorite Batman in any medium over the past, for most of our lives. Stuart, I don't want to talk for you, but I'm gonna let you cut loose about Kevin.
No, yeah, I mean, one of the first messages I sent after I heard the news, which is very sad, was to send you that message saying, "Hey, if you ever want to podcast Mask of the Phantasm," this is my first thing I thought about was I have to watch Mask of the Phantasm because it's my favorite Batman movie and because it's my favorite, performance. It's I don't know, it's my favorite performance, but it's the sort of like the quintessential Batman for me from Kevin Conroy. And it was very sad to hear about his passing last week, especially since, like you said, he's been, unofficially retired, but he just keeps coming back, right? Every couple of years, another project will come out, whether it be another video game or another, Warner Brothers animated independent movie or whatever. And there he is again. And it sort of felt like, it was sad because he would always I expected him to pop up again. He's been with us for the last 30 years, right?
Yeah, he was not elderly. We didn't know I had no idea he was ailing.
No.
And he was only 66. I believe he had cancer and it was not publicized that he did. But I'm going to really miss knowing he's out there. And future projects, it'll be hard to not think about that. And I'm sure Diedrich Bader will slide right in for him or somebody else. But which is
there's
great.
A lot of it feels like there's been a few cases where it wasn't him voicing Batman, but they were doing a pretty good Kevin Conroy impression. I think one case of that was the Batman TMNT crossover movie. I was like, boy, whoever's doing this is doing a pretty good Kevin Conroy, But but yeah, it always just felt like he'd be there, and he was like I heard one thing I read over and over again, as soon as the news of his death hit, was people said, this is the voice and I hear in my head when I'm reading the comics, which is true for me as well. He's the quintessential Batman and Bruce Wayne voice. Not to, denigrate other performers who have taken on the role, but nobody has ever really been able to capture, I think, that the Batman voice, quite as well. And also the difference between the two, dual personalities so well. And when he, many performances of kind of lines like, I am vengeance and things like that just don't quite land when I hear them from other performers. But when I hear it from Kevin Conroy, I just buy it 100%.
Yeah. I got into Batman mid 80s, kind of right around 86 or so. So I came in on like the Alan Grant, Norm Brayfogle, Joe Aparo era. And then of course you had Michael Keaton in 89 as Batman, and he neither physically looked like or certainly sounded like how I thought Batman was supposed to be. And as much as I enjoyed those movies, but when I remember in 1992 watching the Batman cartoon for the first time, and I mean, I could not believe, and still can't believe, watching Mask of the Phantasm, what they were able to do for a supposedly kids cartoon in the afternoons, of this kind of rich storytelling. And the before this in the animation, Batman, they were leaning more towards not Adam West, but kind of like a more friendly Batman. He was like this reasonable guy who might have also been like a scoutmaster who was hanging out with Robin and like, let me be helpful and tell you what to do next, Robin. And suddenly getting this Batman that actually sounded like something that was going to scare the hell out of your rooftop, fedora wearing criminals. He was it. Like it was the voice that I didn't know I needed to hear Batman have, which totally made sense more from like a Dark Knight Returns perspective, or those kind of like certainly the Norm Brayfogle illustrated Batman. Anyway, and like you said, being able to actually have the split between the basiness of Batman and kind of this like more chipper Bruce Wayne, because this is a disguise, was excellent stuff. It was just absolutely amazing from day one. And I do want to also give credit to director Andrea Romano, who probably is the one who found him or knew about him, and directed him in stuff pretty much till about 8 years ago or so. I think she retired.
Yeah, I think it's not. It's obvious that Batman the Animated Series wouldn't have come about without the first Tim Burton movie, right? And it's not that thing. I mean, clearly it's derivative of it because it's got the same Danny Elfman score. But it turned out to be sort of just the right mix for me anyway, and I think for a lot of other people, of the dark, noir influences and the campiness, the comic booky, the Dick Sprang stuff, right? So there's still a lot of color, there's still a lot of fantastic stuff in there, but there's also like the crime drama stuff, and it's just a perfect mix. And yeah, absolutely. I remember the first episode I saw of the show, and I wasn't planning on watching it. I just happened to be like, it was on after school or something like that. And I remember watching was it like a 2 or 3 part Clayface episode of the show. And it just completely blew me away right away. I mean, not just the vocal performances, because I got Ron Perlman to play Clayface. But also the animation was just so like nothing I'd seen before. Right. They seem to use like anime influences for things like capes flapping and explosions and those kinds of the cool like globular movements of the Clayface stuff that made it seem so kinetic, compared to modern or contemporary then, kids animation, but also it was so stylish because everything was so dark. They started from, I think I read that they drew everything on black paper and added the light rather than starting from light paper and adding, darkness. So it was just, I was completely blown away from jump. And I remember as soon as I saw that they were doing a movie, Mask of the Phantasm, it was after like the first season, I think. I was very excited. It was one of the few movie posters I had in my room because I happened to work at a video store at the time in high school, and went to the movie on opening weekend and was, I can tell you, the only person in the theater for that movie.
I wanted to see it very badly. I believe it came out over the winter break.
It was like right around Christmas, I think. Yeah.
So I remember being in a parking lot I had dated the same girl for a while in high school, for longer than you really should in high school. And we were hanging out in this parking lot, and I remember her being like, what are we going to do next? I think we just eaten or something. I was like, well, the Batman movie showing over here. Like, it was the only shot I knew I had while it was going to be in the theater for like 2 weeks. She wasn't having it. And in the end, I am very glad that didn't happen for multiple reasons, not the least of which is that her name was also Andrea. So,
oh, no.
It would have been very awkward to be there with your ex watching Batman's painful breakup with another Andrea for 90 minutes.
So you saw it on VHS then for the first time?
I believe I purchased it on VHS as soon as I could, and was just like, because I was already all in on the TV show. And it was in Houston where I was over that winter break. It was only out for like a week or two. I tried to go see it after Christmas. It was gone. So, which is weird.
Yeah, it bombed pretty hard, I think. Yeah,
I have seen it in the theater since.
There was almost no marketing for it, as I remember. Sorry, I'm sorry, but there was nothing. I remember hardly any like TV spots or anything like that. It was just I got the poster. Sometimes we got posters at the video. So I worked at a video store called Saturday Matinee, which is like a Suncoast Motion Picture Company, right? It's like a record store for VHS and Laserdisc. And so sometimes we would get promotional posters for stuff in the theaters as well. And that was, I think, the first time I saw it was we got these posters like, oh my gosh. First of all, I'm going to take this home. And secondly, I'm going to definitely go see this movie. But yeah, there was not a lot of press for it. It wasn't like, Batman Returns or something where there's, t-shirts and Happy Meals and stuff everywhere. It was pretty quiet. I think it was like a last minute decision to make, because it was originally, I think this was the first, theatrical release from Warner Brothers Animation. And the original plan was to make it, a direct-to-video release, and then they decided to last minute, hey, because it's Batman, maybe we can make, a few extra dollars if we put it out theatrically. And it turns out not so much, but it was a nice try anyway. But it's had a pretty good life, after, as a lot of people name checking it as one of the best Batman movies, if not the best Batman movie. For a long time. I remember seeing it, as a teenager. And at that time I was like deep into my Orson Welles phase. And so could easily see the Citizen Kane, parallels and homages that they were doing with the flashbacks and stuff. And it just completely blew me away. I was all in on the love story. I mean, I just watched it yesterday. I still get chills whenever he's like kneeling before the gravestone and he's like, I didn't plan on being happy. It's I've seen a few versions of Batman, as we've all seen a few versions of Batman, but I've never really seen a version of Batman besides this that really makes me understand why he would make that choice.
But yeah, I completely agree. It's does stuff that was happening in the comics. Like there's this whole version of Batman that's kind of been swept under the rug now that you're in like the Bat God era of Batman makes all the right decisions, blah, blah, blah. And it's like Catwoman's the only person for him because she's kind of a sexy cipher of a character and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And none of which really bothers me, but I feel like what this movie does this thing that's richer than the source material, which was Batman Year 2. And it definitely twists a lot of that. It definitely played with the idea of you knowing Batman Year 2. If you went into it thinking you were going to see the Reaper storyline done again, you were very, very wrong. It borrows enough from it that like, you know, they have some cool visuals from it and whatnot. But the Batman who actually wrestles with whether or not this actually makes any sense to go do, who actually is like considering a different life and having that actually, you know, on screen. And this is where we get into kind of the performance of, you know, Kevin Conroy, who's having to do all of this in a sound booth with like blankets hung up around him. And, you know, you see the pictures of the sound booth from that era. It's amazing, really, what he's able to kind of convey of the, you know, turmoil that Bruce Wayne's going through. There was a plan, and didn't expect to ever meet anybody who was going to make me reconsider the plan. And, you know, what do I owe to people who are no longer here? Do I actually have to go spend my life, you know, hurling myself in front of criminals, or, you know, is there another way to do this that's better? And you get this kind of snippet of, you know, had one or two things been different, there's no Batman. You have Bruce Wayne probably throwing charity balls and being a very concerned citizen while he's happily raising kids with Andrea Beaumont. So
right.
It's a really interesting character driven thing. And it's something that I really miss in a lot of ways in the Batman comics now that, you know, that since post Dark Knight, everybody's like, make him grittier, add more grit. And this is still kind of left over from the 70s and 80s where it's like, yeah, he's the kind of like, he's more of a James Bond sort of character of like, he's still thinking about things outside of work. He's still going on dates with Silver St. Cloud. He's, you know, he's Vicky Vale might be a thing in his life. Andrea Beaumont is a reflection of a character from Batman Year 2 who disappears. I think her name was Rachel in that comic, but it's really good character driven stuff. And both so one of the things Noir took from Wells with the flashback stuff is there's lots of flashback stuff in Noir of, you know, why are we all at this point now? You know, there's a lot of stuff starting, you know, like from Double Indemnity, it starts with him going to tell his tale. He's going to spill his guts, so to speak, as he's sitting there with a gut wound, to, you know, God and everybody of how he got to this point. And so you kind of do that flashback, and that happens a lot in Noir. This feels very much like that sort of thing. I don't know if this is exactly Noir, and that I usually characterize that as like somebody gets in over their head because of a woman, and that kind of is true, but he's being pulled away from getting in to the thing.
Yeah. It's like the reverse. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about Dana Delaney and how great she is, by the way?
Because all day long.
This movie made me a Dana Delaney fan. I knew her from, I think, Tombstone at this point, right? She was like the actress that Wyatt Earp, you know, falls in love with and wants to settle down with. And I had known her from that, and then I saw this movie, and I remember like looking up who is this person, because her voice was so perfect. I have to tell you, as this character, I fell in love with her. And that was so crucial to kind of like believing this journey that Bruce goes on, that he would be willing to leave everything behind for her. She was, how do I not? She was not, and she was different from Catwoman too. She's not a damsel in distress. She's smart and she's quick-witted, and she's like, you know, she gives him shit.
Yeah, immediately.
For being, you know, immediately. Yeah. And I totally bought that he would just say, you know what? Everything I had planned, never mind. I want to spend my life with this person. And I remember just, absolutely falling for it. And it wasn't, you know, too long after that they went ahead and cast her as Lois Lane. And she's still to this day, I think, the best performance of Lois Lane. I feel so bad saying that because I have many Lois Lane related crushes, but honestly, you know, her performance in Superman series is just, I think, unbeatable. And yeah, it's absolutely crucial to this movie that she be somebody that Bruce would believably fall for, and she 100% is.
Yeah, I knew about her because we would watch China Beach, the TV.
Oh, that's right, China Beach. Yeah, I think I'd seen a little bit of that too. That's not you mentioned that. Yeah,
watching that not because I cared a lot about the nurses of Vietnam. I was watching it because of Dana Delaney and being 14 or whatever. But so I knew who she was definitely by the time this hit, and that's part of what's interesting about this film, right? Is in Warner Brothers Animation, she is at this point considered to be A-level talent. She's a movie star. She's also doing whatever that bondage movie was she did with like Rosie.
Right, with Dan Aykroyd. Yeah, Exit to Eden. I 100% read that movie just for her.
I've never seen it. I've always been like, do I really want to see Dan Aykroyd in a leather diaper? So I've consequently not seen it.
I mean, it's a trade-off. You also get to see Dana Delaney in some interesting outfits.
And she's still great. She's now she knows noir. She recently wrote an article for the Noir City magazine about Gloria Graham, and sat in on a Gloria Graham movie or two at Noir Alley on TCM. But this movie has, and I'm just going to go down some IMDb listings here. Of course, Mark Hamill as the Joker. It has Stacy Keach as the Phantasm. I thought was the villain. By the way, they totally fooled me. I'm sorry. No, spoiler it and everything. By the way, we haven't done a plot synopsis. Oh, we should. Isn't there like let me get through this real fast. Synopsis, right? Yeah. Abe Vigoda. The Abe Vigoda is
the Abe Vigoda from The Godfather. Yeah.
He's Salvatore Balestra. Dick Miller is Chucky Saul. Ephraim Zimbalist, of course, is Alfred, who's a celebrity probably only if you follow the cartoons. But that's kind of it. But this is a period before. I mean, you might in the movies, like Disney movies, you have Robin Williams doing the genie or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is how smart I think Andrea Romano was I think she sat around and was like reading the script and was like, well, this person's got, she has all these voices, living in her head. And she's like, well, that's kind of a Dick Miller sort of voice, or that's
yeah.
And she just went and got those people. Like who better to play Salvatore Balestra than Abe Vigoda? So, so we should do a plot synopsis since we've kind of tap danced around it. This is our Suncoast Media official, plot synopsis. We are sponsored by Suncoast Media, and they are very good friends. And if you're in the greater Houston area and you need to have a video or media produced, they're absolutely your people. So, or anywhere in the country, because as I understand it, they travel to Chicago, New York, California, wherever you might need South Coast Media, they will be there for you. So the plot synopsis, go for it, Stuart.
Oh my gosh. So we're a couple of years now. We're at least a year into Batman's career as a vigilante in Gotham City. He's known by the police and by the mob. And at this point, the mob bosses start to be mysteriously being hunted by a caped figure. And everyone assumes that it is Batman. And so both the mob and the cops are out for Batman. But it turns out that it's a new figure, the Phantasm, who kind of looks like the Grim Reaper. He kind of looks like the ghost of Christmas Future, with a big scythe, thing for a hand. And he's off, eliminating mob bosses for unknown reasons. And at the same time, Bruce Wayne's old flame comes back into town, and so sparks these old memories. And she was the person who made him sort of consider, when he was younger, abandoning his mission to become Batman, and then mysteriously disappeared and broke off their engagement. And as soon as she did that, her breaking his heart was what sort of the final straw that led to him finally adopting the Batman persona. So is that good enough?
I think that's excellent. So every high schooler who's grumpy because they've been dumped will feel justified to wear black for
That's right. He went to his goth phase and it just lasted for a really long time.
It is a really good twisty turny story of pulling all these elements. If you watch from out of the last week was Gene Turney's birthday, so we can talk about Out of the Past. And it kind of like that movie, pulling the past into the present to impact, what is happening now, that is where this thing feels super noir to me. And the flashbacks to wasn't life swell,
right. But then it gets progressively worse, and it starts out great, right? So the first flashback is happiness, as he meets her at the grave, and that whole bit about, when she asked him something why do you always look like you want to jump off the cliff? And he's like, why do you care? Oh, I don't. Mother was asking. That bit always gets me. That is such a perfect response. And, her driving off right after. And then it goes into them dating and being happy and going to the, the World's Fair. And him being inspired, of course, by stuff he sees at the World's Fair to create, all the future Batmobile and things like that. And then every successive flashback gets worse and worse as she's worried about her father and his business dealings with these, unsavory types. And then all of a sudden, maybe she's got to leave town pretty quickly. And then she's breaking off their engagement. And it all becomes kind of doom. But yeah, it's fantastic. And if I could say one other thing that I love, not just about this movie, but about the series in general, is it's it's committal to being set in a fairy tale version of the 1930s and 40s, right? It never comes out and says when it is, but I love that they worked in that World's Fair exhibit of the future, which was, I think, 1938 or 1939, right? Which sets the movie, clearly in the 40s if it's looking backward. And everybody's always wearing trench coats, and the guys are wearing hats, and the fashion and the architecture being Art Deco was one of the things that really attracted me to the series and the movie. And it just is one of those things that, as much as I love attempts by live action Batman movies to sort of bring, what if Batman was in the real world kind of things, to me, it's this heightened reality. It's this ability to create this weird Art Deco world that's sort of in the future, but in a version of the future from the past that is Batman to me. That it Batman should be a fantasy to me, and that it takes place in this world that is unreal and is surreal is what really kind of puts it over the top to make it kind of the ultimate version of Batman, if that makes sense.
Oh, I completely agree. 100%. It makes sense. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot in that first Batman film in Batman '89 that gave people license that they had not had before. And to me, it's really, really interesting that then after that, there are all these ripple effects through film kind of after that. I mean, I think you can take a direct line from what Anton first did for the design and then kind of the like 40s sort of costuming that they did on a lot of the characters to something like Dark City then coming out. And eventually that kind of ran its course. But Batman the Animated Series really owned this and owned it with the H and made this world where you could have the Dick Sprang giant typewriters in something or have the moon in every shot. But you also, and everything also has a certain gradient to it because of the paper they were using. Like you said, they illustrated over this dark paper. So everything has texture. That's the thing that like I'd almost forgotten. And you lose in like the comic books that they're doing now in that style is they show a desk and everything kind of has the same texture to it, but it is textured. It's like it's almost like marbled everything, except for the characters. And then, you know, like when they did the robots, like welcome to the future, whatever.
It's textured. It's textured at the same time. The texture makes it so that kind of the minimalist surroundings don't look so empty.
Yeah.
You know, because there's a lot of really large sets, you know, like 20, 30 foot ceilings and rooms that like only have, you know, 1 or 2 bits of furniture in them. But because of that texture, it still doesn't feel like really there should be something else there. And that's something that I feel like is missing from a lot of modern, like direct video animated stuff, where a lot of it just feels so empty to me. Like they just forgot to animate some stuff.
Yeah. I watched the Long Halloween stuff not too long ago, and it made me really realize visually, I think that's part of what was, I mean, like you're already missing Tim Sale. You're not animating Tim Sale. So, you know, you got to do something then in these kind of spare areas. And that definitely to me felt like it was kind of missing.
Also, the aggressive use of, you know, shadows is really effective, especially I think in this genre. Like Batman, they don't have to have Batman being black on black. He's got color in his costume, but he's just not always in the light, right? So they'll just switch back and forth for him being a silhouette to him being in color or partially in color, and it works really, really well. And to me anyway, of kind of straddling that line between being something that's supposed to be sort of dark and mysterious, but also sort of fantastic.
Yeah. Like, look, I know we said, Justin and I, like, we're very supportive of the Batman movie when we talked about it. And I know you're not a huge fan. But there's also like, look, man, you can only have so many shades of like black on black on black before I'm like, I think I saw some teeth go by. It just
becomes a gray mess.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And this kind of like, I would hope at some point as they're lightening up those movies, which I thought was kind of the point of the end of that movie, you know, like maybe figure out how to do this a little bit more with those characters. And I do remember reading in like 5th grade that a lot of ninjas wore blue because actually if you're wearing solid black, you pop a lot more than you would if you're wearing like navy. So make Batman navy.
Yeah. I think in comics, a lot of times blue is just meant to be like a highlight on black because you just can't show. If you show gray as the highlight on black, well, then it's not as colorful.
Yeah.
So yeah. It works better, in my opinion, with more color. And maybe that's because I grew up reading the old comics, but I just think that Batman needs color. He needs also black. It needs to be black, color on black, but it can't be black on black and it can't be gray on black. It has to have color. But I have to say too, that as far as this movie, one of the things that set this movie apart from the series is some of these action shots where the background is moving. Kind of, it reminded me of again of like anime influences. The bit where he's in slow motion on the motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he like steps up on the motorcycle to punch the guy in slow motion, and it totally works. Even you understand it's slow motion, even though the background is moving like super fast. It's, as I'm watching it now, I'm thinking, man, this shot would only work in animation. You could not do this in live action. And there's multiple shots like that. There's that happens on the truck too, when he's turning over the truck. Mm-hmm. It just looks so good. I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't really explain why it looks good, but it looks fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of like little subtle things that you'll get in the characters' expressions that you would get in like a Disney fully animated, like, you know, that like Elsa's gonna have this nuanced expression on her face, you know, in a $175 million costing Disney movie. I don't think this movie probably cost more than like $5 million to make. But with a couple lines, you know, people understand and are able to interpret that kind of 2D animation as well. And that's some stuff that I don't know that the current flavor of DC animation is doing very well. And in comparison, for the time, I will be honest, like, I know all you kids who are younger than us, like, love the X-Men. That show had the worst animation. And it was why I couldn't watch it, is when I was like in high school, and I was a diehard X-Men guy.
And that was contemporary with this show too.
Mm-hmm.
X-Men and Spider-Man. Both.
Oh, they both looked.
I was watching X-Men and Spider-Man and Batman was by far the better show visually and also in every way, honestly. But especially visually.
Yeah, I mean,
it was like a giant leap forward.
I mean, they decided that what they needed was a lot of doodads and to be completely comics accurate to Jim Lee on the X-Men cartoon. And this was like, wrong answer. You strip it down. Everything's about a silhouette. And, you know, that's Bruce Timm's style, right? Is to what is the defining silhouette of each character, which they're able to use then in the title cards. You think about the episode that I Almost Had Him, or whatever it is. I Almost Got Him. They're all the guys sitting around the table, and you're like, you don't even have any light there. That's all silhouette. And you know who every one of those damn characters is. That's cool. Like, you were not getting that out of X-Men. You weren't getting that out of, well, maybe Spider-Man, because all his villains look super weird. But you're not mistaking the Scorpion for, you know, whoever else. But yeah, I think the styling on this thing and the kind of knowledge of, I mean, sometimes they push themselves to places where it doesn't work super well. Like, if you told me what the dimensions were of the inside of the Batcave on this cartoon and what was a bridge for human like foot traffic versus where the Batman was driving, I'm like, they're at sea for some of that stuff. That would be done much better now. But 99% of it just looks so damn good, and was so freaking far ahead of its time. And then of course you have the quantum leap when you get to Iron Giant. But anyway, it's just such a darn good cartoon. I was
amazed at how much, when I went back to watch it yesterday, because I hadn't watched it in a couple of years probably. And I went through a phase in the late 90s where I think I watched this movie incessantly, like every other day or something like that, when I had it on VHS for a while. And so like all the lines immediately came back to me. But one of the things that kind of surprised me in retrospect is just how much story they're able to pack into, like, I think the movie is only like 70 minutes long.
Yeah.
You know, it's got like 4 flashbacks. It's got multiple action scenes. multiple villains, because you got the Phantasm and the Joker. The Joker doesn't even show up till halfway through the movie, and still manages to be a great villain and a great, Joker appearance. It's got multiple set pieces, right? Because you've got the World's Fair, where everything's, wired to blow up, and you have the giant globes, and you have the miniature city where they have that sort of almost, Godzilla like fight between Batman and the Joker.
Yeah, that struck me as really interesting this time of like, oh, this is a flip of the Dick Sprang giant typewriter. Now they're
absolutely giant. Yeah. Everything's miniature and they're the giants. Yeah. Is wonderful.
And I don't want to get like too hoity-toity, but thematically, the whole thing is like, oh, here we are in our youth, where the future is this dancing, singing, colorful, place, and then the future turns out to be like it's been abandoned.
Everything's rotted.
Rotted and rusted and falling apart, and criminals, and it's like there is some deep thematic stuff that they work in without any comment on it. Like they don't draw your attention to it. It's just there. And that it's filmmaking, right? And it's the kind of stuff that, even now, I would say the $175 million Disney movies struggle to do. This is aimed at, I would say, high schoolers and older. Like that's probably the weirdest thing about this movie. Like a 7-year-old's not going to like really grok what the hell is going on. Like, oh yeah, Batman had a girlfriend and I guess she came back. Like that's what they're going to get.
It's kind of a miracle it got made, honestly. As I watch it now, it's like, because it's not aimed toward children, and yet it was from a, weekday afternoon children's animated show. But you're right, it's completely written toward a teen or older audience. There's not like a bunch of, color. There's not a funny sidekick, right? Or like a bunch of funny stuff happening. There's like stuff. There are long scenes where it's just two people talking to each other. But still,
and it's like worried about stuff like embezzlement.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
There's some fairly complicated stuff going on, including the very beginning when Batman shows up. Is you're worried about counterfeiting and circulating the cash through a casino. I'm like, that's something I don't think I would have understood till I was like 15 years old, and they're throwing that willy-nilly into a kid's cartoon.
How they managed to get the Joker into the story was really inspired, I thought. It was like, somebody, not getting too much into spoilers, but they're like, okay, at some point a hitman has to come in. Why couldn't it have been the guy who was the Joker before he was the Joker, right? Yeah. I just thought that was so cool. It didn't have to be, but it was so cool. It could have been any random person, but it made the story so much richer.
I have to think that was like the studio was like, you're not doing a Batman movie without the Joker.
Right. You have to have the Joker in there. Right.
All right. What does that look like? And then it turned out to be this, as you said, this really rich story element.
But sometimes that stuff works out. Sometimes I feel like a lot of times, innovation comes from limitations, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they wanted to do a story that was just this, but then somebody says, nope, here is something we're demanding you put in, and they didn't really want to, but it turned out that it made it even richer. One thing that I'm watching the movie now, and I went years saying that this was my favorite Batman movie. And I think I went I took a break from that as soon as The Dark Knight came out. I may have changed my tune when The Dark Knight came out, but for a long time it was my favorite Batman movie. And it's always been very, very highly regarded. And as I'm watching it now, the one thing that sort of takes it down a bit for me is the whole, what does vengeance solve? Right? Where Batman seems to judgmentally stop another person from devoting their entire life to vengeance, and at the same time never really turns an introspective look on himself and says, am I really talking about myself? At least I didn't detect that from the movie at this time. I didn't detect that he really says, maybe I should think about this for myself as well.
Well, I think she calls him on it in a way that
he calls him on it, but he doesn't. Yeah, no, she absolutely calls him on it, and she's right. But at the end of the movie, it's him alone in the Batcave, and Alfred going like, "Don't worry, Master Bruce, you're perfectly fine." And he's like, "Yeah, I am perfectly fine. You're right. I'm just going to keep being Batman."
So I do think that the end of the movie could have used another beat or two. Like, we don't get a resolution of the cops going, "Oh, that was the Phantasm all this time," because the cops never see the Phantasm.
Oh yeah. By the way, that was another thing that I loved about the movie was I always, for some reason, I know that Batman has, traditionally had this long relationship with Commissioner Gordon, but for me, I kind of prefer Batman operating outside the law. I prefer when the cops don't like him and they're kind of, antagonistic. And I never have seen a scene that's as satisfying in that realm as that scene where the SWAT team is like going all in, right? Like, and you have whole teams of cops and you have the police helicopter hunting him down. And by the way, we haven't talked about Shirley Walker's score for this movie, which is freaking tastic and really, really works in that scene. It just is so over the top dramatic. And everything about Batman being, hunted and having no quarter and having nowhere to go, just really, really worked for me. Still, I think really works.
Yeah, I mean, when the first time I saw it, I was like, "Oh, this is an homage to Year One." Got it. Now seeing it, I would agree with this is. They're using what Miller kind of put on the table of, we're going to push Batman to his limits, of we're going to turn things kind of on its side. My expectation is they maybe thought they were going to do another movie, or they were going to continue this on in season 2, and maybe the network, I don't know, something didn't happen that they thought was going to, with the relationship with the cops in another installment.
Yeah, pretty much goes back to normal, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, season 2, none of this ever happened. Like, I mean, not that the show was incredibly episodic. So, but it doesn't really do anything to indicate that he's, as you said, struggling with what is the difference between justice and vengeance, and what am I actually doing here, and what am I actually solving? And
he gets these giant teddy bear eyes when he says, "What does vengeance solve?" Right? Yeah. I always just found that moment kind of cringy, and it's still cringy to me.
Yeah, I mean, in the context of this, and frankly of the 90s and 80s, coming off of 80s movies, I think he was talking about, like, look, we were in a period where all of our heroes straight up killed people.
Yeah.
Including in Batman 89. Like, Batman just walks around murdering the Joker's guys left and right. Throwing them down bell towers and, whatever else. And it's all played for laughs. And that's what you expected out of a hero. And I remember going to see Spider-Man in 2000, whatever, 2, I guess. And, having to explain to the guy I was with on the way home the reason Spider-Man was not pulling people's spines out. Like, the guy was like, "What a wuss. Why didn't he just murder everybody?" I was like, because that's not what superheroes do. It's like, it's not like okay for people to just like go around murdering. And he's like, "Oh, I don't know if I like this. I don't think I like superheroes then." And we kind of take it for granted now, but that was a statement at the time this came out of Batman doesn't kill. I mean, that was Commissioner Gordon's whole thing. And I think that is what he's trying to say is, like, don't set yourself up, which is kind of crazy, because it's like, look, Bruce, there's a limited number of people she's probably going to murder here.
Right. It's like 5 people. Right. And then I'm done.
She's almost done. Like,
right. Yeah. I got this one,
and frankly,
one guy.
She seems otherwise fine.
Yeah.
So maybe if she finishes it up, you know, but and maybe you can learn something because the Joker keeps getting away.
Well, not only that, but he says that line, "What does vengeance solve?" Right, and then after that, he's trying to catch the Joker. The Joker's got a jetpack. He's going to get away, and he hops on the Joker, and they're going haywire all over the place because the jetpack assumedly can't carry both people. And Joker says something like, "You're crazy. You got to let me go, or we'll both die." And Batman says, "Whatever it takes." And I'm like, didn't you just say to this person that what will vengeance solve? And now you're sitting here saying it's fine with me to kill myself and you as long as you don't get away. Can you? And to be fair, I think that Batman's not a stable person, and it's a fair critique of the character to say he really should examine his choices. But I don't think the movie's really saying that. That's what I'm saying. I don't think the movie's saying that. I don't think the movie goes as far as to say maybe he should realize something about himself. And that's where it kind of lost me a little bit at the end, even though I really did like the final beat of the film where they're both alone. Basically, they're both, separate again, realizing that they've condemned themselves to live this life of solitude, and cue the fantastic Shirley Walker score, and you're out. But I feel like it could have gone one step further, to say, hey, this thing that you said to her, maybe apply that to yourself.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that there was more to explore there. I always think that with Batman. He's such an important character in kind of 20th, 21st century fiction. And he goes largely unexamined for the badassery. And whenever you start looking at it too close, people go, he's just a comic book character. I'm like, he is, but he's also a character that people take really seriously. And we don't seem to have a problem digging in with literally everything else. It's really that people don't want you to look too hard at Batman and what he's up to. And to that point, and before this, we're talking a bit about the fact there's like 40 Batmans now in the comics, and like how terrifying that would be to live in Gotham with this like crazy militia of a bat cult running around, which is how you would interpret it, right? And I'm like, how much more interesting would it be if they actually had a moment of self-realization instead of like the absolute certainty that the thing to do is put on combat armor and like go like fight people in secret wars that blow up city blocks, and never like worry about their own collateral damage. Like there's some really interesting stuff you could do that people who are read comics now are in their like teens, 20s, and 30s. I think everyone would be up for it. But that's not what they're writing these days. It's all like just get to the next scene where someone kicks someone in the face. To be fair to the Batman, I think the Batman with Robert Pattinson got as close as any mainstream movie has gotten since Mask of the Phantasm to actually having Batman, do some introspection, right, about his role. I don't know what'll come of that. And I don't think by any means, I still love Mask of the Phantasm. I still think it's one of the best portrayals of Batman, if not the best. I guess I wanted them to just go that one step further and just commit, to their own, to their own thematic thing, Yeah, and we don't know. And we talked at the beginning about how this thing utterly bombed. Like, maybe there was a plan at some point to do Phantasm 2, which would have been confusing to the Phantasm fans. But Batman loves a steel ball. But I feel like if this thing bombed that bad, probably the less said about it, the better around, Warner Animation when they're having this lucrative TV show.
I think, ultimately, Batman has to come to the conclusion that he has to be Batman because Batman has to go on because of commerce, right? Yeah. But I just at least appreciate the acknowledgement that this is all in service of a really, I don't know, a really broken psyche, a really deranged person. And yeah, maybe that, and the effort to maybe say something to us, to the audience, about maybe those things that you should let go in your own lives, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that this thing actually does, like we were saying, speak to an older audience. I think kids can watch it and be like, yeah, Batman punched the Joker, good times, which that's not like derogatory. That should be a thing that happens in a Batman story. But I do think this was like trying to do as much investigation as they could probably get away with. And we don't know what was cut for time and budget and what the grander plans were. I mean, 70 minutes seems real short, even for like an animated feature. Like theatrically, you're supposed to be, I think, at 80 minutes. So the fact this is only like 70 something minutes is kind of crazy. I don't know if they tacked a cartoon onto this or something to actually get it into theaters.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember that, but yeah, it's possible. Yeah, but it had, I remember a couple of sequences that it seemed like there are several sequences in this movie that reminded me of other things. I remember the truck chase early in the film where he's not yet Batman, where he's like hanging off the front of the truck, really reminded me of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I didn't know if that was an intentional.
Given what I've heard Bruce Timm say in when they leave him alone with a microphone to do commentary, everything's the reference you think it is.
Everything is. There's another bit that when one of the mob bosses he trips and falls into a grave, and then the Phantasm shows up and essentially pushes the gravestone on top of him, which is exactly how Ed Harris died in Creepshow.
Yeah, it's
and the motorcycle stuff seemed very Akira to me.
Oh, I think in the early 90s, everyone would have been wanting to do Akira.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure like, even if that wasn't what they originally thought, they were like, it's a gang of toughs, blah, 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 action sequence. But by the time they probably get to storyboarding it, they're probably thinking very much of Akira.
But I should say too that the thing looks, I don't know what format were you able to watch it in this time?
I watched it on HBO Max.
HBO Max. So yeah, I've actually bought this movie on Amazon Prime like years ago, because as soon as it became available, I bought it. And then I went to watch it on Amazon Prime and it was in Paint and Scan. Right. It was the full screen version. I was like, this can't be. So I went around to, other formats to see if I could find a widescreen version, and I went to HBO Max to play it. And to my delight, as soon as you push play on Batman Mask of the Phantasm, they come up with a, in remembrance of Kevin Conroy screen. That was really delightful to see because I didn't expect it.
I didn't
and I wonder how many things they've put that on, if they put it on the animated series or if they put it on, the other, direct to video movies he did, like that Mr. Freeze one. But that was really, really cool to see. And the HBO Max presentation is in widescreen and it looks fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I that was when I started like really, this is the biggest TV I've ever owned. It's, whatever. I don't know if it's coming through in 4K or not. I never really pay attention to that stuff. But the presentation it's gorgeous on HBO Max right now. And the sound too, that you were talking about the Shirley Walker score. I mean, one of the things that's just heartbreaking with 30 years and Kevin Conroy passing is also like Stacy Keach has passed, Abe Vigoda has passed, Dick Miller has passed. I think Ephraim Zimbalist has passed. So and Shirley Walker passed really young. She passed like 20 years ago or something like that.
I remember listening to this score, just being really surprised by how good it was, and wondering what those phrases that the choir was singing were.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I read at some point that it's not Latin. It's just, and it's not gibberish either. It's just like the names of the animators are on the movie, like spoken backwards or something like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
But at some point in the score, I could swear, like right at the end of the movie, when he, and it's that final shot of him in the city, and like, okay, I'm re-engaged, I'm Batman again, right? And and there's the bat signal shines, and he swings off to do justice or whatever, and then they play the score again. I could have swore the chorus sings, "Oh, Batman." I could have swore that's what they were saying.
It's entirely possible.
So in my head, that's what it's going to be in my head canon.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, as people always say about the Williams Superman score, the song says Superman, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look up in the sky. It even says, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Shirley Walker, it's sad because she kind of passed just as the internet was really blowing up, and would have been like, now it would be a big thing that she passed, because all the nerds who grew up on her would be talking about it. And but the score she did for the Batman Superman adventures is still, to me, like an amazing minute of storytelling. Like it's absolutely amazing.
Absolutely great. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
And I remember I was in an apartment by myself, because that came out my last year of college, and like that coming on my 13-inch TV and just stopping dead in my tracks. Like, oh my God, she topped herself. I cannot believe she topped herself. So good. Just so good.
Her Superman scores are great too. I almost kind of feel bad because she has to follow John Williams, and that's basically impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But still, managed to make a pretty great Superman score.
And I don't know how they did any of that on, you hear about the budget for those Warner Brothers shows, and everything was a cost-cutting measure. Everything.
Yeah.
Especially Superman. And I'm like, was she playing every instrument herself? Like, how did she do this? I know there's the Warner Brothers Orchestra sitting around, so I'm sure it was like one day in the, maybe an afternoon or something with those people.
I mean, they can afford to pay the orchestra to score the Scooby-Doo movie that never got released after they announced that they canceled it. So maybe they're doing okay.
Yeah. I don't know how any of that worked, but I that's a whole other topic for not this podcast.
Sorry.
A lot of questions about what happened there with that movie. I just read about that this week. Anyway, we both kind of been overly excited about this movie, and I think for good reason. It's really hard to point to many things like I know we all have our favorite things when we were kids, but this was something I saw as not a fully I was a voting age adult, I'll put it that way. And discerning and ready to be cynical about stuff. And when I finally did get to see this, and of course the cartoon itself was something that I kind of obsessed over as well. And the incredible quality and writing that went into all of this stuff is just really notable, and something that I get people like animation and their fandoms or whatever for a variety of reasons. This is the kind of stuff that gets me fired up. Seeing someone actually swing for the fences, and even if everything's not a home run in it, you at least knew what they were trying to do. And anyway, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I've had the unfortunate experience recently of revisiting things from my youth that did not hold up. But Batman the animated series and Mask of the Phantasm definitely both hold up very well. And a lot of it's due to the, like we've mentioned, the minimalist, way that they have the presentation, how much expression they're able to get into just like a pause and a squint of the eye, which has been, infinitely memeified, but didn't have to be a thing if it weren't for this version of the character. And I think that, over time, I think this is going to live on as, one of the most definitive versions of the character. And it's sad, like you said, to have seen the passing of Kevin Conroy and so many other cast members. But this really does hold up, and it really helps define the character. Hopefully, will continue to for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I wish the folks writing the comics would look at this and kind of say, "Hey, what's working here that we're not currently doing?" Because I think that comics kind of need to dial it back a little bit on things not all being kind of operating at a grand cosmic level all the time. That what people really kind of latch onto are these more human stories, and that would be an interesting and more adult take to me of this kind of material to give us a reason to take it more seriously. And it's frankly the kind of stuff that was in the Batman that I think made people take the Batman seriously. It's not going to be by throwing more Robins at Batman. So,
yeah, notably Robin is, basically all the supporting cast of superheroes in Batman's universe are missing from this movie. This is purely a Batman Bruce Wayne movie. I don't think is Commissioner. If Commissioner Gordon's here, I think he's just here for a cameo.
He's basically really just stands here around alone, saying Batman doesn't kill, and then he's
right.
Like,
that's right. Yeah, at the very beginning, but I don't think he ever even talks to him. And I think that's part of the point of the film is to make him feel, isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it works really, really well, and absolutely holds up.
All right, everybody. We will be, I think mostly now we're going to be doing Christmas movies through the rest of 2022. Please join us. We've already recorded our first Christmas episode that will drop shortly after this. And anyway, thanks so much. Go watch this movie if it's been a while.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.